For more than a decade, she's only been known as Jane Doe from Opelika. She has a name and she has a story, a very horrific and sad one.
On January 28, 2012, residents of a mobile home in Opelika, Alabama, found the remains of a little child in their backyard. No one knew how it had gotten there, and detectives would be mystified for more than 10 years until advanced DNA technology unraveled a family secret that no one was supposed to find out. So, what exactly could have happened to the poor innocent child? And how did her remains get to where they were found? Hi, and welcome back to Mysterious Hook, friends. Today we are looking at a cold case finally solved in 2023 involving a 6-year-old baby Jane Doe. But first, if you have the time, please subscribe to the channel. So without any further ado, let's dive right into this mystery. Today's case will take us to Opelika, a city located in the east central part of the state of Alabama. It is the capital city of the county of Lee and boasts a population of more than 30,000 people. Opelika is famous for the Robert Trent Jones Grand National Golf Course, which has been the venue for several national and other important golf competitions. Apart from this, the city is also popular for its vibrant arts scene, historic downtown area, and other scenic tourist spots. Amore was born in Virginia on the 1st of January 2006 to parents Sherry Wiggins and Lamar Vickerstaff. At the time of her birth, her mother Sherry was only 20. Lamar, on the other hand, was in his mid-30s and was a military man serving with the Navy. She was a blessing, she was smart, and she was special, and that's why I named her Amore, which in Spanish means love, Sherry said of her daughter. Soon after Amore came into the world, Sherry's and Lamar's relationship took a hit. Something that made matters worse was the fact that Lamar's relatives had frowned on his romance with Sherry from the start. And when their affair eventually produced a child, they had more cause to be displeased. They were simply disappointed that Lamar now had a child out of wedlock. With the growing tension, Sherry had no other choice but to take Amore and move out of the apartment she and Lamar shared. This was in 2006. She began to take care of her daughter on her own and got little to no help from Lamar with maintaining their daughter's well-being. Shortly after this, Lamar got married to another woman and moved on with his life. Sherry was hurt and decided to drag Lamar to court in order to at least get child support from him for Amore. But things didn't go as planned. Sherry had some legal troubles of her own, and this proved to be her undoing. At that time, I was making some bad decisions and some bad choices in my life where I did have some run-ins with the law. Due to this, the court system labeled her as unstable and decided that Amore would be better off in the care of Lamar. In addition to this, the court also directed Sherry to begin paying child support to Lamar, since he was to begin caring for Amore. And so, in 2009, when Amore was about 3 years old, she permanently went to live with her father and his wife, Ruth. It did make sense for her to be somewhere more stable, Sherry said. Even though Amore had been taken away from her custody, she ensured that she played an active role in the little girl's life and would occasionally visit her at Lamar's residence. However, this soon came to an end. Lamar was transferred to Hawaii by the Navy, and he had to move there with his family. Due to this, Amore was now even farther away from her mother. Sherry was saddened by this unexpected occurrence, and over the years, she went to court to try and regain custody of Amore, but it was all to no avail. At some point, she was told she could no longer appeal the case, and this meant that Amore would continue to remain in the care of her father till she turned 18. I felt like they made me feel so bad about myself. I kept trying, and the doors kept being closed. I felt like the best I could do was live out my financial obligation, which I never stopped. I felt like one day I could tell her, I never gave up on you, and all I could do was take care of you financially, and that is what I did. If I couldn't do anything, I could care for my daughter by supporting my child financially, Sherry said. Despite how everything turned out, Sherry kept hoping that one day she would see her child again, but sadly, this would never happen. At around 10:47 a.m. on January 28, 2012, The Opelika Police Department received a call from a resident of a mobile home community located at 1775 Hurst Street in Opelika, Alabama. The call was about a discovery that was strange and disturbing. The skull of a human being had been found outdoors. Police officers quickly jumped into their vehicles and made their way to the scene. When they got there, they were met by the person who had placed the emergency call. The individual was a woman named Yvonne Johnson, and she wasted no time in explaining to the officers that her son had been the one who found the skull in their backyard. According to Yvonne, the skull had not been there a day before, and its sudden appearance had been startling. After she told them this, she led officers to the back of the mobile home to see for themselves, and true enough, lying on the ground in plain sight was a skull. It was quite small, and they could tell by just looking at it that it was a child's. In addition to this, officers also noticed that it had a few strands of hair on it. Its presence there was odd, and officers could not help but wonder where the rest of the body was. The area was quickly secured and detectives were notified. When they got to the scene, they immediately did a sweep of the mobile home community. The aim of this was to see if they could find any more skeletal remains, but nothing turned up. With the day getting dark, detectives were forced to give up their search for the day. It wasn't until 2 days after the shocking discovery that detectives were able to locate some human remains. These were found in the woods, several feet away from where the skull had been found. Detectives also found a pink long-sleeve shirt with ruffles and heart-shaped buttons alongside the remains. All of these were collected and then sent to the lab for forensic analysis. Finding out the identity of the child shot to the top of the list of priorities for the detectives. Forensic analysis and autopsies were performed on the remains at an FBI laboratory located in Quantico. There, it was discovered that it belonged to a black female, and she was speculated to have died between 2010 and 2011. Her age was estimated to be between 4 and 7 years old, and in addition to this, the medical examination also revealed something chilling. The deceased girl had previously suffered several broken bones that were already healing before she died. Her bones also indicated that she had been malnourished while alive. That was not all. A fracture was also noticed in her left eye socket, and this made detectives believe that she had been blind in the left eye. They speculated that this facial deformity would have been obvious to anyone while she was alive. In the end, her death was ruled a homicide, and detectives immediately began an investigation. They had no idea who she was, but they were determined to uncover her identity. Since they could not tell what name she had been given, they decided to call her Opelika Baby Jane Doe. Since that day, Baby Jane has been part of our OPD family, said Opelika Police Chief Shane Healy. One of the first things detectives tried to do was develop a DNA profile for the deceased girl, but the conditions of the remains made this impossible. When this failed, detectives began to review thousands of school and birth records, but their efforts yielded no result. There was no record of any missing child around the age of the deceased girl, and no one came forward for a long time to provide any useful information about her. Things would remain silent until 2016. That year, a forensic artist from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was able to come up with sketches of what Baby Jane might have looked like before her death. The sketches showed her dressed in a pink shirt with heart-shaped buttons. This was similar to the clothing that was found near her remains. These sketches were then released to the public with the hopes that someone would recognize her. Several weeks went by after this and nothing came up. But when they least expected, they got a very crucial piece of information from someone. This was in September 2016. The individual who came forward to provide the information had been a former Bible school teacher at a church known as the Greater Peace Baptist Church. The church was located in Opelika and was less than a 15-minute drive from where the skeletal remains had been found. According to the former Bible school teacher, she had seen a young girl back in 2011 who looked like Baby Jane. The teacher told detectives that the girl had looked slightly unkempt and had been unable to communicate fluently with other children, and because of this, she had mostly kept to herself. When asked if she remembered the girl's name, she told them that she didn't. With this information, detectives went to the church and took a look at the photographs that had been taken back in 2011. After going through several photos, they came upon the picture of the little girl that had been described by the teacher. Detectives could immediately see that her description fitted perfectly with that of baby Jane. She had an obvious deformity in her left eye, just like they had speculated from examining baby Jane's remains. The photos that were obtained from the church were a bit blurry, and so they had to use special software to enhance them. These photos were then released to the public. The following year, detectives employed the help of the University of South Florida to perform a procedure known as isotope testing on baby Jane's remains. This method involves analyzing the number and type of isotopes present in a sample, which can provide information about the age, origin, and composition of materials. After the test was done, it was discovered that the deceased girl had a higher amount of lead in her system, and this indicated that she may have been raised in Alabama or somewhere in the Southeast. Everybody has a certain amount of lead, and it depends on where you are raised, what type of drinking water you've had, said Opelika Police Captain Jonathan Clifton. Several months went by after this, and detectives had nothing to go on. However, they never relented and were determined not to leave any stone unturned. To them, the case was like a black cloud that loomed over the community, and solving it was sure to bring a sense of fulfillment. In January 2022, the Opelika Police Department partnered with Othram Laboratories to carry out advanced DNA testing on the remains. They had not been successful in carrying out a DNA test on the bones in the past, but they believed that advances in the world of forensic science would make it possible. They were very difficult skeletal remains to actually create a profile from, especially the kind of profile that you need to do genealogy, said Kristen Middleman, Chief Development Officer at Othram Labs. The lab used a unique technique known as forensic-grade genome sequencing and was able to finally extract DNA from the remains. After doing this, the DNA was then used to build a profile for the girl, and it was then uploaded to the database. With this in place, detectives sought the help of a renowned and experienced genealogist by the name of Dr. Barbara Ray Venter. Over several weeks, Dr. Barbara and her team, Firebird Forensic Group, worked round the clock to try and identify close relatives of the deceased girl using the DNA profile that had been created. Their hard work eventually paid off because in October 2022, they were able to determine who the girl's father was. It was a moment of joy for detectives because they had finally made a discovery that had evaded them for more than 10 years. It was a large piece of the puzzle that had finally been resolved. As for the girl's father, he was none other than Lamar, the naval officer who fathered a child with Sherry back in 2006. Detectives would not know until later that baby Jane was actually Amore, Lamar and Sherry's child. When detectives did a background check on Lamar, they discovered that he was still alive and was in the process of retiring from the Navy. They also found out that he was stationed in Jacksonville, and they decided to visit him there to inform him about the death of his daughter. In December 2022, detectives traveled to Naval Station Mayport in Jacksonville. They hoped that Lamar would provide them with details about his daughter. However, this ended up not being the case. After they met Lamar, he was strangely unwilling to talk about the little girl and avoided every question thrown at him. This immediately raised suspicion in the minds of detectives, but there was nothing they could do at that point. The meeting with Lamar did not go as expected, but this did little to discourage detectives. Instead, they intensified their investigation and also discovered that Lamar had a wife, Ruth. They eventually met with her, but just like her husband, she provided no helpful information. However, she told detectives that she had no idea who Lamar's daughter was or who the mother could have been. Detectives knew from that moment that they had to find out who the little girl's biological mother was. Dr. Barbara and her team got to work once again, and soon they were able to determine that the woman they were looking for was Sherry. It was also discovered that she was living in Maryland. Detectives traveled down there, and during the course of the meeting they had with Sherry, they got to find out a lot. She told them that she gave birth to a girl back in 2006, and she had named her Amore. However, she expressed shock upon hearing that Amore had been dead for more than a decade. She explained to detectives that she had lost custody of the child to the father, Lamar, and when Lamar moved to Hawaii, she no longer had any contact with her daughter. When she had reached out to Lamar, his response had been cold, and he had warned her not to call again. During the course of all this, I would still reach out. I would reach out via email over the years, and they would block my email accounts, Sherry said. I called Lamar's number that I knew to be his, and he told me that if I called again, he would block me from his phone, she added. She continued to call, and Lamar stayed true to his words by blocking her, and at some point he even threatened her with the police. Despite the fact that she had not laid eyes on her daughter for years, she told detectives that she continued to pay child support and had till the end of 2022. To back up her claim, she showed them documents that contained detailed information about the child support. The shock written on the faces of the detectives was quite visible after Sherry finished telling her side of the story. They could hardly believe their ears. After getting back to their base, they began to reach out to the school boards as well as clinics located in the states Lamar and Ruth had resided in after they gained custody of Amore. By doing this, they were able to discover that Amore was never enrolled in any school. There was also no record to show that the couple reported the little girl missing. This was all the confirmation they needed to know that Lamar and Ruth had something to do with her death. On January 17, 2023, the couple was arrested in Jacksonville and held at the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. Lamar was charged with felony murder and Ruth with failure to report a missing child. 2 days after this, a press conference was organized, and Opelika Police Chief Shane provided in-depth details regarding the case. He also expressed his gratitude to all those who had contributed in one way or the other to ensure that the case got solved. The level of dedication to this case I have never seen in my entire career. To see a group of men and women come together searching for a name. Many of us said that we did not want to leave our time at this police department until we had her name. And now we do. Amore Wiggins, Shane had said. Sherry, on the other hand, remains grateful to the detectives for their dedication to the case, and she wants to see justice served. She was just a baby. They deprived her of everything. She was a child, Sherry said. At the moment, the case remains open, and detectives continue to gather additional information in regards to Amore's relationship with Lamar and Ruth. Lamar's and Ruth's fate also remains to be determined. Amore certainly suffered terrible abuse and neglect before her death, but thankfully the long hand of the law has caught up with those involved in such an evil act. It's still yet unknown how Amore died, but how do you think that happened? And to what extent do you think Lamar and Ruth contributed to her death? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe.